Hey guys, welcome back. Okay, so this is part 2 in a whole series of tutorials that will teach you how to create professional specification drawings to accompany your fashion illustrations. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then jump back to part 1. There you'll find a full explanation and also part 1 of the tutorial. However, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create a variety of different sleeve variations and add yet more complicated design features to the silhouettes we created in part 1. So first of all, let's open up Adobe Illustrator and get started. Okay, so I've just opened up Adobe Illustrator and I've also opened up the document that we're working on in part 1 of this whole tutorial series. So as you can see, these are the kind of like the blocks that we created, or the flat technical spec illustrations we created in part 1, just to give you an idea of basic silhouettes, but also design detail and adding bits and pieces and etc. So now, obviously in this part of this tutorial, we're going to start working on sleeves. And as you can see here, we have our model template. And what I've done is, actually no, first of all, let me just explain. So this pack, we have a downloadable pack that you can access, which basically gives you all of the various different basic blocks. We have torso, we have bodycon dresses. We also have a whole bunch of different sleeve variations, which have already been created for you. And you can just simply move these around. You could add them onto dresses. So it's just a really helpful document when it comes to creating your own, let's say, it's a great starting point for when it comes to creating your own CADs. For example, you could add this gorgeous sort of like cowl neck, strappy cowl neck to, let's say, a dress or a skirt pattern, etc. So yeah, there's loads of stuff in there. Have a look at it, see what you think. But what I'm going to do is we're going to obviously start drafting these sleeves from scratch as if we don't have that document, just to show you how to do this. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I've got my model template, which is obviously we explained in part 1 of this tutorial. So what I'm going to do is there's not much space on this side to draw a sleeve. So what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to grab this girl or this model template and just move it off to the right hand side here, so I have a little bit more space for the sleeve. To do that, I'm going to get my big selection tool. I'm just going to click on the model, and also we have this arm here which isn't selected. So I'm just going to hold down my shift key and select the arm as well. I'm going to hit copy and paste, so Control C and Control V on my keyboard to copy and paste that into the document. And we're going to start looking at sleeves. Okay, so we're going to work on 3 basic sort of like sleeve outlines first of all, and we're going to start off like in part 1 with the outline, and then we're going to start adding details to it to make it look a little bit more realistic. But the outline is really important because obviously depending on your project, it all depends on what the outline of your sleeve is going to be, or what the proportions of it are going to be. Is it going to be 3/4 length? Is it going to be full length? Is it going to be a cap? Etc. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this bodice block, which is something we created in part 1 as well. I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it and just place it where it needs to be on her body, just like so. And the reason why I'm doing this is because we really need an armhole location. To draw the sleeve, we need to know where the armhole point is. We need to know where the sleeve head is going to be. So this just helps us kind of like locate that. Also, there's something else I want to mention as well. The reason why this arm is separate from the actual body, it's grouped separately to the body, is because let's say we want to draft a sleeve that is, you know, straight up and down. That's fine. But what if we wanted to draft a sleeve that was slightly further out? Well, what we could do is we get our big selection tool, click on this sleeve, this arm here, go to our rotation tool, click on, you set that little mark there. This is basically the rotation point. So if you then, so once again, select the arm, go to the rotation tool, and then click on the center of that point, you can then click and drag and rotate this arm out, and you can have it at any location you want. Obviously, the higher up you get, it doesn't look as good, but you know, it gives you an idea or a map of how to actually, you know, it just gives you a template for which to draw your sleeve on. So maybe you want the sleeve to come out further like this, for example. Maybe there's an underarm seam we want to display. This just gives us the ability to do that. So I'm going to have mine probably at about, you know, like at this angle of rotation. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get my big selection tool. I'm going to click and drag over all of this. I'm going to go Object and then Lock Selection. And this just means it's a proper template. We can't select it or edit it or move it, which means anything we do on top of it will not affect that template. So what we'll do is, first of all, so we're going to create 3 basic sleeve outlines. I'm going to start off with a cap sleeve because it's just so very, very simple. And I can show you also how we can adapt that cap sleeve into a whole bunch of different variations. But first of all, we're going to map the outline. And to do that, I'm going to get my pen tool. So just up here in the top corner, it might be somewhere else on your side palette, but just look for the pen tool or press P on your keyboard. I'm then going to go to my stroke. I'm going to double click. So I'm going to go to stroke color and make it black. I'm then going to go to my line width, which is over here. And let's just make it 2, which is the same line width as my bodice. As you can see here, well, actually the bodice is slightly smaller, but 2 is fine for now. So the line width of the bodice is slightly less, but we can sort that out later. So 2 point. So I'm going to start, as I said, mapping my sleeve. So I know where my shoulder point is, which is really useful. I'm going to go for a little cap, and I'm not actually curving it now. I'm just going to simply mark the point. So I'm going to go from this point to, let's say I want it to finish roughly about here, and I want it to come into the armhole. I don't want it to go down to the actual armhole. I want it to come to about here. So now I've pretty much mapped out a very basic, simple cap sleeve. Now I'm going to go to my Convert Anchor Point tool, and I can start to then, let's click on this point, click and drag. I can then start to create a little bit of curvature. And already that looks like a cap sleeve. But because we're kind of working with 3 dimensions or trying to imitate 3 dimensions, this straight line might not be that great, so I could always then curve this bottom one. You know, you could do whatever you wanted to, depending on your design. You could curve it to make it look however you want it to look. And you could even have it like this, for example. I'm going to leave it like that. So that is pretty much my first basic sleeve. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my small selection tool, click on the sleeve, then I'm going to go to my eyedropper tool. And if I click on the eyedropper tool and then click, let's say on the bodice, it will apply whatever settings are applied to the bodice to the sleeve. So for example, the line width, the fill, everything. And so as you can see, we have the fill. Now it's not actually attached to this block at all, which is fine. I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit later on. But right now I just want to draft a few more sleeves just to demonstrate this whole concept of mapping basic sleeves. So let's take this block. Let's take this one and this. Let's move it off to the side here. And let's start again. So I'm just going to remove this. Let's go in and I'm going to start to map. In fact, you know what? Yeah, okay, let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to leave this off to the side here. It's not complete, it's not finished. We haven't transformed it to the opposite side, but I just wanted to show you this outline concept. Let's go to our pen tool once again. Let's then click on that shoulder point. And then now we're going to do something a little bit more 3/4 length. So let's go to roughly just on the forearm, like this. And it depends if you want it to be quite thick or if you want it to come into the arm. We're just mapping it out. So for example, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the fill because then you can actually see the template underneath. So let's just click on that and then remove it. And let's start that again. So we haven't got a fill this time. I'm going to go from this point. Oops. Zoom in a little bit so we can find that point. I'm then going to go to, let's say, 3/4, just roughly where the armhole level is. Then we're going to go down about 3/4 length. Then we're going to bring it out to here. We could go into the elbow, but I'm going to take it to the actual block itself. So it's quite a dramatic sleeve. Now, because this is going to sit behind the bodice, what I'm going to do is just simply take it up to this point and then leave it. Okay, so essentially whatever area is here is underneath the bodice. And now I can get my Convert Anchor Point tool and I can start to create my 3/4 length sleeve. And maybe, I don't want to take it out like this. This is ridiculous. So I'm just going to do a little bit here. And I can also do a little bit here, like that. Same with the bottom. We can move this up now. We can change it around. We can move these points. Just get your small selection tool. You can then click on the point and you can move it. You can change it. You can do whatever you want to do just simply by tracing. Maybe you want to have a little bit smaller. I haven't actually got a design in mind. I'm just kind of like drawing freestyle. But it just shows you that you can just simply map it out and then select these points independently with a small selection tool and then start to change the shape of the sleeve. So we could have it almost like a boxy fit, but then have it coming in at the wrist, for example. Perfect. Let's have a look at that. Okay, great. But then obviously, once again, we're working with 3 dimensions, or trying to at least anyway. So I'm just going to get my Add Anchor Point tool, which allows us to add a little point here. Then I'm going to Convert Anchor Point, and we're just going to curve it ever so slightly. But with my arrow keys, I'm just going to nudge it down like so. Let's do that again because that probably wasn't clear. I'm going to go to the plus Anchor Point tool. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to use my arrow keys and just nudge it down a little bit, off to the left, right, move it down. I'm going to my Convert Anchor Point tool. I'm going to click and drag. And then we have a little bit of curvature just to keep it a bit more realistic. And I can also do the same here as well. You could do that, for example, just to make it feel a little bit more realistic. Maybe that point's a bit too low. Just move that up a bit. There we go. Fantastic. Okay, so we've then created the other outline. And once again, I can select that, go to my eyedropper tool and click. So we're already starting to create some really basic sleeve types. I can grab this, move it off to the left here, or to the right, sorry. Get rid of this, and now let's create something a little bit more interesting with some drape. Or let's create 4. Why not? Let's just create 4. So this time I'm going to create almost like a bishop sleeve. So once again, I'm going to go from this point. I'm going to go about 3/4 way up the sleeve, or just up from the armhole. We're going to go down. We're going to take it in to about here. So it's quite a wide cuff, but it's quite a static sleeve, this one. Otherwise it's made out of static material, so it's quite structural. Let's remove that fill. And now I'm just going to start to map this out. So let's get our Convert Anchor Point tool. Let's do this one. Let's also do this one here. So I'm just clicking and dragging. Let's zoom in. And there's also another feature in Adobe Illustrator which is really, really handy, is basically if I click on this point here, you'll see you get this little attribute. And if I just click and drag that, it allows you to curve the shape of the sleeve. I'm going to just, small selection tool, click on that point, find the attribute or the element, and then just drag that to make it a little bit more consistent. Once again, we can add our plus point here, nudge it down a little bit, or in fact, let's nudge it up. And then let's go to our Convert Anchor Point. Let's just click and drag that out. Lovely. And what I could also do is, okay, maybe it's a little bit too dramatic. So let's go for our plus anchor point tool. I can add it roughly at the elbow line, and then we can just move it in. So the reason why we're kind of using it, and we could do the same on the opposite side, like so. So we can create all kinds of different shapes here. It depends if you like it or not. As I said, I'm not working to a particular design. I'm just kind of playing around to show you how you do this. You know, maybe it's too long. So what we could do is, oh, my template is not locked. So get my big section tool, select the template, select that sleeve, object, lock, selection. So now that's locked, I don't actually edit the template. I get my small selection tool, I can just click and drag, and then I can just move these up. So I could have it maybe slightly higher. I might have to adjust these points ever so slightly to change it around. But it just shows that once you have your basic outline, you can then start to adapt it and change it however you want to, just by moving the points around and changing the moving around and then changing the beziers or the with the anchor point tool, so these, for example. Okay, also I haven't drawn this extra bit here going up to the armhole, so let's just do that now. I'm just going to grab that point, take it up to the top, click off. Brilliant, so that's my next sleeve. I can click on this and then go to my eyedropper tool, click on the block, and there is our sleeve. Very, very basic, but you're just creating silhouettes at this point in time. And once again, if you really wanted to, we could go Object, Unlock All, and we could take this sleeve, big selection tool, and then we could also hold down the Shift key, select the arm as well, go to our rotation tool, find roughly where that point is, and we could rotate it out. And then obviously we could change, maybe that rotation point's not the best. And then we could obviously change the angle of the arm and then obviously adapt these lines to fit it. So for example, you know, you could do this and you could do that. You see, so it just gives you an idea using that template how to adapt your sleeve and change it. Okay, let's just lock that template again. Object, let's lock selection. So next what I'm going to do is let's just move this off to the side here. I'm going to get rid of that sleeve and let's create another one. Okay, so let's do something a little bit more interesting. So let's click on that point. Let's go to, I'm going to create quite a draped or flared sleeve. I'm going to click here, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to completely bypass that armhole. So I'm going to take it to about there. And once again, it's completely up to you how you create your, how you map this sleeve out. And I'm just going to do something maybe like that. Let's move this in a bit. Also, once again, let's get that point. Let's add it to the bottom there. Move that down, and then we can just shape it. So that's quite a really interesting one. Well, it's not interesting, but I'm doing this one because then we can start to add some details, because at the moment these are very basic, they're very boring, they've got no information on them whatsoever. So let's just create this one and let's play around with it. So what I might do is I'm going to bring this really far out. I'm going to take that down a bit. Let's zoom in. And so now I'm going to start to, let's say you have this as a drape. So what I'm going to do is get my scissor tool. I'm going to snip here and snip here. Going to remove that bottom edge, and we can also remove the fill from these lines. We don't really need it at this point in time. I'm going to get my pen tool. I'm going to click on this point here, and then I'm just going to start to almost like create like a ruffle effect, just like this, you see. I'm just clicking and dragging, going back in, clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging, click and drag, click and drag, and we can take it here as well. So that's almost like a ruffle effect, and it doesn't look particularly brilliant. You can make this far, far better than I have, but we can always then just move these points around. We can then change these beziers a little bit, make it a little bit more, make it a little bit prettier. Once again, this is, because we're not tracing here, it's very much down to your own illustration ability, but obviously the more you practice and the more you experiment, the better you'll be. And also if you use our template pack, these illustrations are already done for you, so you can just adapt ones that already exist, which makes it much easier. So now we have this outline here. let's just simply add a fill to it. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, click on it, go to my eyedropper, and there's the fill. But now I want to add some details to my sleeves. So first of all, we're probably going to have some, let's say, pleating or some ruching here, and we're definitely going to have some, let's say, folding of the fabric here. So I'm going to get my pen tool, I'm going to go to my stroke, and I'm going to go 0.35 is what we use for ruching, what I use for ruching. You can use whatever you want. I'm just going to click, and then click and drag with my pen tool. And then if I hit the P key, the P on my keyboard, it basically finishes that line. I can start to draw another one. If I didn't click P, you'd then just start drawing. So hit the P, and that allows you to draw again. So we can just create some sort of like little ruching detail effect here, whatever you want to do. Move these points around. By this point, you should be pretty good when it comes to, if you've watched a lot of our fashion illustration tutorials and also part 1, you should have some pretty decent skills when it comes to playing around with points and moving them and creating bezels, etc. Okay, great. So that's a little bit of ruching on the cap. I'm also now going to add some of these ripples. Just going to click and drag. Click and drag. Don't worry about the line width so much. We can then select that and make that 0.35. Add some more here. So once again, it's up to you. It depends on how much you want to add to this in terms of illustration. And the more lines you add, then obviously the better it's going to look, or the more detailed it's going to look, and the more fluid it's going to feel. Okay, just something similar to this, for example. We can maybe do one here as well, just to fill in that space. So we're now starting to add a little bit of detail to these sleeves. Okay, so this is our first example, pretty much complete. We have to also add this to the body of the actual garment, but I'm going to show you that once I've completed all my sleeves. Obviously, this is working with more fluid fabric, creating like a ruche effect, etc. The cap sleeve should be a little bit more straightforward, but I just want to show you how to create basically like a simple trim. And to do this, it's really, really simple. You can apply this concept to your neckline, to your hem, to any part of your garment, really, to pockets, whatever. So it's a really useful one to have. I'm going to go to my pen tool, and I'm just going to simply click at this point and also this point. And I'm just going to click and drag and try and get it as parallel as possible to the hem of that sleeve. And then I'm going to go to my line width, and we're just going to go up, up, up. And so basically the thickness of this line depends on how thick you want your trim to be. So if I want it quite small, have it quite thin. If you want it quite large, then have it large. But I'm going to go about that. I'm going to also make sure my cap is projecting cap. And then now I can get this point here, and I can move it just into position so that bottom edge of that line touches the hem of the garment, or hem of the sleeve. Same for this one as well. I can move that around. I can also change this curvature. So that should be pretty decent. Next, what I'm going to do is, let's just move that over. Next, I'm going to go to Object and then Expand. I'm going to go to expand the stroke, not the fill. Click OK. And so now you can see it's turned from a line into an actual object. So now if I change, so with this selected, if I change this to the line width without the fill, you can see it's actually an object. And we can also take this down to 0.5. Looking good. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust my sleeve just to match that trim, just so it's perfect. So I'm just going to get that small selection tool. I'm going to grab that point, move it down ever so slightly. We can then move this around just to make sure it's absolutely perfect. Next, I'm going to select this trim with my small selection tool, get my scissor tool, and I'm just going to snip here and snip here. Let's just delete that completely. I've got a little bit of an issue here. It didn't quite go outside. So I'm just going to get my small selection tool, click and then drag that up. I can then drag it back down. And next I'm going to select this point, hold the shift key, select this point, right click, join. We can now do the bottom edge. I'm going to go to the scissor tool. I can then just go snip and snip. Ooh, make sure it's on the line. Snip. I can then hit the backspace key, get rid of those. I can then grab this point, hold down the shift key, grab this point, right click, join. Great. And so now the reason why this is an object is because if we want to fill it with a different color, we can fill it with a different color. So we can have a different color trim. If we were to just draw a line across here, we would have to use the sleeve color instead. So that's why we've done it in that manner. Let's just make that a little bit darker. Great stuff. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a few more little bits and pieces, details to my other sleeve, which is this one. So let's have a look at this more sort of like blues on sleeve. Let's take it over here. So this is very, very simple stuff that we're doing, but it just shows what you can do and how you might do it. And obviously you can become more complicated or create more complicated details as you go. So let's have a look. What I'm going to do is for this sleeve, I'm going to add a trim for certain. So let's just click at this point, draw that line. We can then make this a bit larger, projecting cap. Let's go, let's move this up. There we go, let's move this up. Let's go object and then expand, click OK. Let's remove that line width, there we go. And then snip, snip, remove this, join these 2 points together. Same for this one, snip, snip. Join these 2 points together. Let's just correct the bottom edge. There we go, it's a bit nicer, a bit cleaner. And what I might also want to do is add some ruching here. So for example, I could just simply put in some elements. Let's make this 0.35. So you're adding basically design elements to this silhouette, to this outline, to give people an idea of what it is actually going to look like, or what kind of, you might not want to have ruching all the way across this. You might want to have it just, on one part of it. So this is how you're sort of like creating your design. And also, if you don't want to do the whole thing, what you could do is just simply, let's grab the sleeve, let's lock it. So object, group, then lock selection. I can grab these lines. I can then go copy, paste. And I can then simply just chuck this down here. Go to my rotation tool, click, and then rotate it. I can do it again, paste it in, grab this here, rotate, and then I can move these points around individually, and I can remove some of these as well. Remove, 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 just backspace a few times. I can then add some more bits in. Great stuff. Let's remove the fill on those as well. And so that's how we kind of create our ruching. I can maybe move this line down just so it's not so obvious that it's a repeat. And you could even move these lines up, for example. Oops. So grab all of those upper points, grab all of these upper points, and we could just extend them, for example. Or you can make them really, really short. You'd probably have to play around with the settings, but it just gives you an idea of how you can adapt it. Also, something else to mention, because at the moment this looks very, very static, I might want to add a seam line, also like an underarm seam. So I'm just going to get my pen tool. I'm just going to click. And let's take it down to here. I'm going to click and drag. And then I'm going to use my add point tool. Click. Let's just move that across with the arrow keys. You can move it down as well, just to create that kind of that underarm seam line, like so. And then we can make this 0.5, and you could even, if you wanted to, add some a dashed line to this to indicate that it's got a top stitching or that it's actually a proper seam line. And to do that, you just go to your, click on the big selection tool. You can then go copy and paste. So we've pasted the same thing in. We can move it into position. Not sure what happened with that bottom. Okay, no, it's fine. Move it into position, like so. So it's almost parallel to it. We can move it, nudge it around with our arrow keys, and then we can go 0.35, and we can give it a dashed line. Let's make that 5 and 2.5. And there's your underarm seam line with a top stitch. Maybe that's too thick, so let's make that 2 and 1.5. That's much better. And then at the top here, for example, we could add in maybe a little bit more of this ruching. Or maybe it could be a pleat, for example. You're designing as you go, I guess. Let's remove the dash. And for a pleat, I would probably do something. So I would do that. Maybe move that up a little bit. So that's our pleat. Extend that out. And then also we want to add a little bit of fluidity to this sleeve. So I'm just going to, with my pen tool, click. And maybe like drag this down here like so. Let's get our convert anchor point tool. Click and drag. And we could also add something here as well. So the more details you add to this, the better it's going to look or become. And these are quite thick, so let's make these 0.35. Perfect. And the last thing I'm going to do for this is add something that I do for all of my blocks. So basically, I really just don't like this little point here, but we kind of need it. So what I do is I normally get my pen tool, I click here, I just click and drag to create this weird kind of like squiggle. It's almost like, I think of it as like an underarm crease, or the garment creasing at the underarm. And let's just up that to be about 2.5, click off. And it just basically hides that point. It softens it a little bit. It kind of makes it feel like it joins the sleeve a little bit more. Okay, so we've added detail to 3 of our sleeves now. This one looks a bit dull, but essentially it's a cap sleeve, so there's not much you could really do to that. We could, for example, maybe add, once again, a little pleat. Like so. Let's make that 0.35. There we go, just to make it a little bit better. And once again, I'm just going to get my big section tool, click on this little element, copy and paste it in, and then just add it here, like so. We could do the same for this one. Copy, paste. I haven't actually added any details to this one, so I'm going to do that now. So I'm not going to have a trim on this, but what I am going to do is put a stitch line to indicate that it's been top stitched. So I'm going to get my pen tool, click, I'm going to opposite side, click, and I'm going to get my add anchor point tool, place it in the middle. Get my small section tool, click and drag it down, get my convert anchor point tool, click and drag, and then here let's make this 0.35, let's give it a dash, and then, oops, to 1.5, there we go. Get my small section tool, I can then just simply click on that point and then nudge this down ever so slightly. And we can do our underarm, so I'm going to click at this point here, click and drag at this point. So once again, pen tool, click at this point, click and drag at this point. Let's then make that 0.5 because that's our seam line. Let's remove the dashed line. Once again, get my big section tool, click on this line. I can just go copy and paste, move it into position. Get that little point there, so my small section tool, just click on the line, click on that point, nudge it up with the arrow keys, just so it meets the body. And then here we can make this 0.35 dash line. And then once again, I can add some more details to this. Maybe, oh, sounds like I'm doing a lot of pleats at the moment. Let's do a little pleat. Let's make that 0.35. And then let's add in some, let's give me a pen tool. I'm just going to add in some, let's say, drape lines, or just to make it look or feel a little bit more realistic. Same with this one here. You could do that, for example. Let's get my convert anchor point tool, just change the top. It's a bit weird. It's probably better. And just snip there and there, remove that inner piece. Yeah, it's alright, it's a bit better. So as I said, just play around with it. It's all based on your own illustration concept. Okay, so now we've created our, let's say, 4 different sleeve variations. I'm now going to show you how to turn these sleeves into, let's say, templates, which you can then drag and drop onto other, let's say, designs. So for example, here we have a whole bunch of different sleeves. And as you can see, if I just move it away, it's a template. And I could add this to anything. I could add it, for example, to this particular block here. And then we have a pretty much an almost perfect style, which I've just created. We might have to then just move little bits and pieces around, but essentially it just makes life much easier when it comes to creating, very, very quick, simple, easy illustrations. So we're going to create templates. And the reason why they're so easy and the reason why they match up is because the armholes are always consistent or the same. So to do this, I'm going to get my big section tool. I'm going to click on my bodice block here. I'm going to go object, and then I'm going to go lock selection. That means that only my sleeve is now selectable, which is great. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my small selection tool. I'm going to click on this layer here, and I'm going to remove the fill completely, okay? And you know what? I'm even going to get my big section tool and drag it off to the side here. In fact, no, let's keep it where it was. Sorry. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my small selection tool. I'm going to click on this, let's say, the sleeve outline. I'm going to get my pen tool. I'm going to click on this point and click and drag at this point here. And I'm just going to map out that armhole. Okay, so I've just mapped out that armhole there. Next what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my small section tool, or sorry, my big section tool. I'm going to click on this element. I'm going to copy and paste it. So we now have 2. We have this one, and we also have this one. I'm then going to drag. So first of all, I'm going to grab this piece here, and I'm just going to snip just here and here. I'm going to turn that line into 0.5. Perfect. I'm then just going to grab those and I'm going to place it over the top of the existing sleeve where it used to be. And I'm also going to go Object and then Lock Selection. I'm then going to click the one underneath it, and instead of having a line, I'm going to change it to a fill. So let's just change that fill to be grey. But because, as you can see, this has now become a seam line. So if I just click and drag over all of this, you can see that we have got, here's our sleeve, but it's made up of two pieces. We have the outline layer, which is this black line, and we have it at 2 points, because this is the outside of the sleeve, and then we have it at 1 point, or sorry, 0.5, for where it actually is, where it's the seam. And then we also have our fill, which is just simply the same object with these lines joined, but with a fill, and that just goes underneath it. And so this way, it's become a template. So now, if I grab this whole thing, we can go Object and then Group, and I move it back over. You see if it's slightly off, if I move it with the arrow keys, if I nudge it ever so slightly over, it's actually replacing the line underneath, and it's giving us that 0.5 line, and you can always nudge it with your arrow keys. So that is now sitting on top of it. It's not actually part of the block, but it looks as though it is part of the block, which is really handy. So once I've done that, and don't worry if that was a little bit quick, I'm going to show you for the rest of them as well. So I'm going to select this. Next, I'm going to go to I'm going to right click, Transform, Reflect, and then copy vertically. I'm going to move it off to the opposite side, position it so that it's slightly overlapping, so we get that 0.5 line. Get my big section tool, click, hold down the Shift key, click on this element as well, and go Object and then Group. So now I can move this around, and we can put it anywhere. So I could put it on any other bodice block, I could put it on a torso block, and it fits and matches. So that's how we create a template of the sleeve, which you can then move around. So let's do exactly the same thing for this one. I'm going to get my big selection tool, I'm going to click and drag over my bodice, I'm going to go Object and then Lock Selection. And here what I'm going to do is, we can then simply, where is it? I'm going to get my pen tool. So I'm going to get my pen tool, I'm going to click on this point here, so my sleeve outline, I'm going to click here and I'm just going to map it, just like that. Okay? And then let's just move this away. And so once again, because at the moment we only have one of these, I'm simply just going to go copy and paste. I'm going to take this off to the, let's say the right hand side here, and then going to get my scissor tool, I'm going to snip here and here, I'm going to select this line, I'm going to make that 0.5, and I'm going to remove the fill from this panel. So next I'm going to click and drag over these two items, and then going to remove the fill, so it's just line art. Get my big section tool, click and drag, then go Object and then Group it, and then place it over my sleeve. And next I'm going to get my small selection tool, I'm going to click on the fill of the one below it, and I'm going to remove the line, like so. And as you can see, that gives us that nice 0.5 line. So once again, just to show you, we have the outline layer, which is the fine line and the thick line, and then we have the fill layer. And if I just place them over the top of each other, we now have a sleeve that can attach to any block. Going to get my big section tool, click and drag over the whole item, Object, Group. I'm then going to move that into position, and I can then just use my arrow keys just to nudge it in to make sure that it gives us that 0.5 line. Next, get my big section tool, I'm going to right click, Transform, Reflect, copy it across the vertical, move it off to the opposite side, move that up a little bit or down wherever it needs to be. Oops, there we go. And now I'm going to get my big section tool, select this item, hold down the Shift key, select the other item, Object, Group. And that is now a template which can be moved and changed. Let's do it one more time. So once again, get my block, Object, Lock, Selection. And then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the outline. So small selection tool, select the outline, get my pen tool. I'm just going to click on this point, map that armhole, like so. And then I'm going to simply select the outline again, copy and paste it off to the side here. Going to get my scissor tool, snip, snip, and then select this line width, or this line, make that 0.5. I'm also going to remove the fill here, like so. I'm going to remove the fill from this one as well. I'm going to move that back into position over my existing sleeve, and then going to select my small section tool, select the fill layer, and just remove the line art. And then big section tool, click and drag over the whole element, go Object and then Group. I can then move it in, I can move it out just to sort of like create that 0.5mm line just here. Then I'm going to go right click, Transform, Reflect, copy it, move it off to the left hand side. There we go. Then get my big section tool, click, hold down the shift key, click, object, group, and then you know what? One last time, just for good luck, I'm going to select the outline of my sleeve. I'm going to get my pen tool, click on this point, map out that arm, copy and paste it, scissor tool, snip here, snip here. Let's remove the fill. Let's select this line. Let's make this 0.5. Let's move that back into position, just here. Let's select the fill layer. Let's remove the line art. Then let's zoom out. Let's grab all of this. Let's then group it. So object and then group. Let's then right reflect, copy, move it off to the opposite side. And for some reason this block has got a slightly higher shoulder, but it's fine, I'll just move that up for now. And then once again, big section tool, select this, object, group, and now we have a sleeve template. Okay, so that is pretty much how you create sleeves, and obviously it really depends on what design you're going for. Sorry about the noise in the background, sounds like there's a police incident. So it really depends on what sleeve you want to create, but I've kind of given you an idea of how you might create various different bits and pieces. Which should be quite handy. And then once again, once you have a whole bunch of these and you've made loads, you can just simply move them around. You can add them to different, let's say, panels. You know, you could take this and stick this one here, for example. Okay, the colors don't match, but it just shows you what you can do when it comes to building and creating your designs. It's really, really very, very simple. Same with necklines as well. You know, these bodices can be moved around. You can add this to, let's say, a dress. You could place this down here, for example. And you could have like a halter neck, sorry, a cowl neck dress pattern, and all you basically need to do is just then simply add it to the block. And this probably won't work, but I'm just going to do it very quickly to show you. And there you go, kind of gives you an idea. Okay, so there's just one more thing that I want to show you as part of this tutorial. So let's say, for example, you already have a whole bunch of these different sleeve options and you like them, but you maybe want to make some changes. Let's take this one, for example. Well, it's really simple. Without having to redraw the whole thing all over again, what we could do is just simply grab this, copy and paste a new one in. Oops, hang on. The bodice was locked, hang on. Let's copy and paste this, a new one of these ones in. Let's zoom into it. Let's just lock the body. So big selection tool, click and drag. Let's go object and then lock selection. And actually, you know what? No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get my small selection tool, click and drag over the whole left-hand side of this block and hit backspace. So we're now just working with one side. And what I could do, actually, if I wanted to be really snazzy, I could grab my model, copy. We could then paste that in here. We could then move her into position so we can actually see where we're going to be drafting this on the body. Let's move her up ever so slightly. Let's lock her down. So now let's say I wanted to make that sleeve slightly different. What I could do is get my small section tool. I could click and drag over this whole lower part, and I could just drag that sleeve to be even longer. So see how we can just change this ever so slightly. It just makes things much, much simpler. And if you want to be really, really clever, it might take a little bit more doing, but I could maybe take all of these items here, just move that in ever so slightly. Do the same for the opposite side. I know this looks a bit dodgy now, but I can always then just change it and adapt it, you see? So we've done that, made a slightly smaller let's say sleeve style. Maybe I probably need to remove the trim, or I could just simply start to change and play around with these curves just to like make them a little bit more realistic. Here we go, we'll just change it a little bit. It's just basically experimenting, and also we've got quite a few of these here, so let's just remove some of these lines. We can tidy them up in a minute. That one could probably go. This one we could bring in. We could bring this one down perhaps. Well, actually it shouldn't be there, but still. We could remove this one. We can even add some more in, for example. So just to change it up, make it look a little bit prettier. But it's so much quicker than drafting a brand new one, if that makes sense. Also, this line here does not fit the shape of our new sleeve, so I can maybe add a point here and a point here. I could then take those and then extend them out. I could change the beziers just by clicking and dragging. Let's change this one. Same here, we'll change this, try and make it parallel to the existing line. Remove that. And there you have a completely different sleeve variation. You might even want to completely remove these bits and pieces. Maybe you don't want them. Maybe throw it as it is. So it just shows that you can adapt the sleeve very, very quickly and easily without having to go back and redraw everything all over again. You can move these down to here, for example, just like that. Perfect. So that would be a completely new variation. I could then just simply select all of it, transform, reflect. We've done all this before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Drag it over to the opposite side, and then we have a completely new, let's say, sleeve template. So I could then simply select this one. Let's then group it. And this is a new sleeve template. I could get rid of her completely, and I could then just replace it like that. You see? So it's just very, very simple. Once you've got the basic kind of concept, you can then start to create different sleeve variations based on the original one, but very, very quickly. And I could do it to the other ones, but I'm not necessarily going to. Well, I could do it to this one. It depends how much time we have left. So I could simply select these points here. I could make this much, much higher up. I could even give it a little bit of a kick. Also, very much depends on your project. Also, don't forget to do the same with the color layer as well. These can probably go. That's quite an interesting underarm line, but it's probably not possible or even feasible. So let's just do that. And this is all just using the small selection tool. I'm just clicking them and then moving these points around and changing the beziers to create the style. And maybe you want to bring this out to here, for example, this out to here. You can do this very, very easily. Maybe you don't want that kick there. Do the same to the color layer or the fill layer as well. This you could bring in as well. And here you can maybe add a point, make it a little bit more aggressive. Do the same to the color layer as well. Bring that up. You can always move the beziers around if it's not quite matching. There you go. Maybe extend that out. Change the shape of it a little bit so it's a bit of a different pleat. And there you go, look, a completely different sleeve created in very, very little time at all. Oops. There's that one little line that needs moving in. And then once again, just simply copy this. So I've got an asymmetric style here. Essentially I should have copied and pasted it down and then worked on it, but I can just simply go copy, paste, place it down here. I can remove that one, I can grab this one, go transform, reflect. I can then copy it across, move it across the opposite side. Group those once more, so it's a template. And then here I could go transform, reflect, copy, move it across the opposite side. I can move this up here just to make sure that it's in the right location, because look, it's slightly off there. The template wouldn't work. Move that to there, group that, and there we have a different sleeve variation created very, very quickly. So once you have all of your sleeves, you can adapt them very easily and very quickly, depending on what you actually want, which is brilliant. And you know what? Just to have even more fun, what I could do is, I'm not sure how feasible this sleeve is, but I could even create like a little cap like this. So I draw that line in there. And then here I just simply snip the outline of my sleeve and get rid of that. We can also get rid of our color layer. This one's going to take a little bit more doing, but that's okay. I'm using the existing template or sleeve shape to do it. So I'm just getting rid of all these points here. Let's just average these. Let's join. Send it to the back. I can even put a little trim on this if I want to. Click and drag. Let's move that point up. So I'm just doing this just as a demonstration to show you kind of what's possible once you've got. Brilliant. Let's just do that there. There we go. Let's move that to the back. Let's copy and paste that off. Let's then snip that, 0.5. Let's remove the fill from both. Let's then remove the line art from this one. Move that in. Group. Got a little bit of an issue down here, but that's fine. We can fix that quite simply. And there we go. So we have a cap sleeve created very, very quickly. And once again, we can just, oops. Just ungroup them all. Let's group that, bring it down here. transform, reflect, copy, move that across the opposite side, group those, move that off, pull this one up just to create the template for this one, transform, reflect, let's go copy, move it across. Okay, we didn't get the line. That's better. Group, transform, reflect, copy, move that into position, group, and to be fair, we probably don't need these because obviously it's not going up. And this probably needs a little bit of fixing. I've rushed this one a little bit, so it's not perfect, but you can also change these just to clean it up and make it a little bit neater. Same on this side as well. Just neaten that up. In part 3, I'm going to show you technique number 2, and this time we're going to be creating our specification illustrations by tracing hand-drawn sketches that we've scanned and imported into Adobe Illustrator. Also, if you've enjoyed this tutorial, then please hit the subscribe button. We've got some amazing content coming up that we really don't want you to miss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.